Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Ignition Time. Folks, the country could be heading towards an economic crisis if the debt ceiling is not raised. Basically, it's the country giving itself permission to borrow more and more. Since the 1960s, the United States has raised the debt ceiling more than 80 times. Yes, you heard that right, more than 80 times. And a majority of those times, they did it in a bipartisan way. Our government managed to increase the debt ceiling in a bipartisan way. Both sides supported it. But now, our climate is so divisive and the two parties just don't see eye to eye on anything. In fact, here's a tweet on your screen from President Biden. My message to Republicans, if you don't want to help save the country, get out of the way. Let's roll the tape and hear what President Biden had to say to Republicans. Let's watch.
The meteor is headed to crash into our economy. Democrats are willing to do all the work stopping it. Republicans just have to let us do our job. Just get out of the way. If you don't want to help save the country, get out of the way so you don't destroy it.
Now, President Biden has been super busy. Here's another tweet on your screen from the president. The bipartisan infrastructure deal and the Build Back agenda are not about moderate versus progressive. These bills are about competitiveness versus complacency, opportunity versus decay. They're about leading the world or continuing to let the world pass us by. So the president, as you can see, has been very busy, and climate change is a major factor for this president. In fact, President Biden said that extreme weather has cost Americans $99 billion in the past year. Let's roll the tape and hear what the president had to say.
Last year, because of extreme weather, cost America $99 billion. 99 billion taxpayers' dollars.
And President Biden also recalls how he tested out the all-electric Ford F-50 back in May. I'm quoting the president, "I got to drive that sucker and it's a big boy. It's a big one." Let's roll the tape and hear from President Biden. Let's watch.
Back in May, I had the chance to tour Ford's new state-of-the-art facility in Dearborn, where union workers are building the first ever all-electric Ford F-150. I got to drive that sucker. It's quick, 0 to 60 in 4.1 seconds. And it's a big boy. It's a big one.
Now, as you can imagine, President Biden has been pushing his agenda. He said, I quote, "That's why 81 million Americans voted for me, the largest number of votes in American history, clear majority." Let's roll the tape and hear from President Biden. Let's watch.
I took this agenda to the country. They said it was time to build an economy that looks out from Scranton, Pennsylvania, where I grew up as a kid, instead of looking down from Wall Street. An economy that looks out from Howell, Michigan, and towns like it all over America, that brings people from every race, background, religion into the game. That's what, and notwithstanding some of the signs that I saw come, that's why 81 million Americans voted for me. The largest number of votes in American history. A clear majority were supported when they supported me.
And the one guy who continues to be a thorn in President Biden's agenda is the one and only conservative Democrat from West Virginia, Joe Manchin. In fact, he did indicate that he could support a package up to $2.2 trillion. So a reporter asked President Biden, "Do you think Senator Manchin will support a package more than $2.2 trillion, sir?" And President Biden's response is this. You heard him on television today. Sure sounds like he's moving. I hope that's the case. Let's roll the tape and hear from President Biden. Let's watch.
Thank you. Do you think Senator Manchin would support a package more than $2.2 trillion, sir?
Well, you heard him on television today. It sure sounds like he's moving. I hope that's the case. Thank you.
Great job, Mr. President.
In the meantime, folks, it's very clear the president is on the attack against Republicans. In fact, I'll show you this headline on your screen from Bloomberg. President Biden calls foes of the economic plans complicit in U.S. decline. Pretty strong comments from the president. He said this, I quote, "To support these investments is to create a rising America, an America that's moving. To oppose these investments is to be complicit in America's decline." So you can start to see that the president is very aggressively pushing his agenda. And he actually framed these measures as legislation that would assure that the United States remains competitive against countries like China. And the president said this, I quote, "The work of our time, it seems to me, those of us who hold public office, is to prepare ourselves to be more competitive and to win the fast-changing 21st century in a global economy. These bills are not about left versus right or moderate versus progressive or anything that pits Americans against one another." So let's wait and see what happens, folks. And I have to tell you that it's not going to be easy for the president. In fact, the president made his remarks in the district of Congresswoman Elisa Slotkin, who's a Democrat and former CIA analyst who narrowly won a House seat in a district that was actually carried by former President Trump in the 2020 election. In fact, late last month, Slotkin criticized Democrats for linking the infrastructure and social spending bills. Here's what Slotkin told the Detroit News. It was hard for me to understand why leadership decided in the first place to tie the two bills together. That's not how we normally operate. That's not my preference. So, folks, it's very interesting that the president is trying to push his agenda in areas that were previously won by former President Trump. In fact, President Biden said this: every bit is paid for, and by the way, no deficit. Every bit of it is paid upfront. So you can start to see that the president is pushing as hard as he can. In fact, the White House communications director, Kate Bedingfield, said to MSNBC, he's reaching out to Democrats all across the spectrum. And I think what we're doing here is making sure that everybody's voice is heard as we converge on compromise consensus. So you can start to see that the president, by the way, he knows politically that he can't do anything without the vote of Joe Manchin, the conservative Democrat from West Virginia, and Senator Kristen Sinema from Arizona. So he's trying to reach out to everyone. In fact, President Biden said last week that he expected lawmakers to come together and to fall from the $3.5 trillion that he had proposed. And he said he had discussed a range between $1.9 trillion to $2.2 trillion with Senator Kristen Sinema and Senator Joe Manchin. Now, it's very clear that we will have another larger bill on top of the bipartisan infrastructure bill. But how large will it be? It still remains to be seen. And that is where we stand right now. Now, let me know whether you agree or disagree with the president's comments that Republicans or anybody who opposes the infrastructure plan is complicit in America's decline. That is a pretty significant thing for the president to say, because I do believe that we need to have an infrastructure package to be competitive in the future. But to actually say that the opposition is complicit is actually trying to participate in America's decline and to sabotage the American economy, that is raising the rhetoric to a whole new level. In fact, this is the time, this is the day and age that we live in. Like I said, we've successfully managed to raise the debt ceiling. We've successfully managed to do many important things for decades. But now we live in a very divisive climate. And as our country tries to recover, I have to tell you, our recovery at the moment is very fragile. As our country tries to recover economically, as millions of our fellow Americans try to piece their lives back together, it's time for our politicians to stop playing games and to come together and do what's best for the American people, because that is what they're elected to do. That's what they're paid to do. That's what we have hired them to do when we cast our vote in the ballot box. And I have a feeling that all of this has something to do not only with the current economic crisis, the current economic reality we face, but also the midterm elections coming up in 2022 and the upcoming presidential elections in 2024, because at the end of the day, politics is about timing, opportunity, it's about tribalism, and it's about perception. Each party wants to make it seem like they are the saviors, whereas in reality, all they're doing is looking out for their own best interests. Please click the like button. Please click subscribe. Please enable notifications. My name is Dr. Nitin Chhoda with Ignition Time. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for giving me a few minutes of your time today. It means a whole lot to me. And for me, it's a privilege to be able to serve you on this channel. Please click like. Please click subscribe. Please enable notifications. That would mean a great deal to me and my phenomenal team of Joseph and Jeanette, our video production team. Also follow me on Twitter. This right here is our Twitter feed, and you'll be able to keep up with the latest news stories on Twitter with me. My Twitter handle is ignition_time. That's ignition_time. Thank you so much. Once again, it's an absolute privilege to be able to serve you today with this episode of Ignition Time. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next episode of Ignition Time. Don't forget to click like, subscribe, and enable notifications. And also please share this video with your friends and family. Thank you so much. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye.